Plants sleep and dream in their own quiet way. Just as you settle into rest each night, plants have their own rhythms of sleep and wakefulness. Many flowers close their petals as darkness falls, not just to protect themselves from the cold, but because they follow an internal clock as precise as any timepiece. Morning glories unfurl with the dawn, while 4 o'clocks wait until late afternoon to open their colorful faces to the world. This gentle rhythm is called circadian behavior, and it happens even when plants are kept in constant light or darkness. Deep within their cells, molecular clocks tick away the hours, keeping time with an ancient precision that connects them to the turning of the earth itself. Some plants even move their leaves throughout the night, slowly folding them inward like hands pressed together in prayer. The sensitive plant, when touched, will quickly fold its leaflets and droop its branches, as if retreating into a protective sleep. But even without disturbance, many plants shift and settle as night approaches, conserving energy and moisture until morning calls them back to full alertness. Sunflowers follow the sun across the sky like loyal companions. Young sunflowers perform one of nature's most enchanting dances, slowly turning their heavy heads to track the sun from east to west throughout the day. This gentle movement is called heliotropism, and it happens because cells on one side of the stem grow faster than those on the other, creating a graceful bending motion. The sunflower doesn't strain or hurry. It simply follows its brightest guide with patient devotion. As the sunflower matures and its seeds develop, this daily dance gradually slows and stops. The fully grown flower settles into facing east, greeting each dawn with steady warmth. Even in this stillness, there's wisdom. The eastward orientation helps attract more pollinators in the morning hours, when bees and other insects are most active, ensuring the continuation of the sunflower's quiet legacy. This daily ritual reminds us that following the light, even in the smallest ways, is one of nature's most fundamental instincts. Trees share resources with each other through underground networks. Beneath the forest floor lies one of nature's most generous systems, a vast network of fungal threads connecting tree to tree in an underground web of mutual support. These microscopic partnerships, called mycorrhizal networks, allow trees to share nutrients, water, and even information with their neighbors. An older tree with deep roots might send water to a younger sapling struggling in shallow soil. A tree rich in sugars from photosynthesis might share its abundance with a neighbor growing in the shade. This sharing isn't random or accidental. Mother trees, the large mature trees that anchor a forest community, actively nurture their offspring through these fungal connections. They recognize their own seedlings and send them more resources than they give to strangers. It's a form of plant parenthood that happens entirely in darkness, beneath our feet, through chemical signals and flowing nutrients. When a tree is attacked by insects, it can send chemical warnings through this network, alerting other trees to begin producing defensive compounds. The forest, in this way, is not a collection of individuals competing for resources, but a community working together for the survival of all. Some plants can live for thousands of years without showing their age. In the quiet corners of the world, certain plants have mastered the art of longevity with remarkable grace. Bristlecone pines, growing in harsh mountain conditions, can live for over 4,000 years. Their ancient wood twisted by centuries of wind, but still producing fresh green needles each spring. These elderly trees don't grow quickly or tower impressively. Instead, they grow slowly and steadily, conserving their energy and building dense, resilient wood that can withstand millennia of storms. The secret to their extraordinary lifespan lies partly in their harsh environment. Growing in poor soil and extreme weather conditions, they develop slowly and face little competition from other plants. Their resin-rich wood resists decay, insects, and disease. Each ring of growth is narrow but incredibly durable, creating a living record of thousands of years of climate history. Some of these ancient trees were already mature when the pyramids were built. They've watched the rise and fall of entire civilizations while remaining rooted in the same spot, quietly photosynthesizing and growing ring by tiny ring. Their longevity isn't dramatic or flashy, just steady persistence through the long flow of time. Bamboo can grow 3 feet in a single day. While some plants measure their growth in seasons or years, bamboo operates on an entirely different time scale. Certain species of bamboo can grow up to 3 feet in 24 hours, making them among the fastest growing plants on Earth. This rapid growth happens not through frantic activity, but through a perfectly orchestrated expansion of cells that have been prepared in advance. Bamboo achieves this remarkable speed by preforming all the nodes and segments of its new culm underground or within the existing plant structure. When conditions are right, these compressed segments simply expand like a telescope being extended, each joint unfolding in perfect sequence. The growth is so consistent, you could almost watch it happen in real time, like a gentle green fountain rising from the earth. This rapid growth serves a practical purpose. In dense forests where competition for sunlight is fierce, bamboo can quickly shoot up above the canopy to claim its share of light. Once it reaches its full height, which it does in just a few months, the bamboo culm stops growing entirely. It doesn't get taller or thicker. It simply stands, swaying gently in the breeze, having achieved its purpose with quiet efficiency. Plants can sense when they're being eaten and respond accordingly. When a caterpillar begins munching on a leaf, the plant doesn't suffer in silence. Within minutes of the first bite, complex chemical reactions begin throughout the plant. Damaged leaves release volatile compounds into the air, chemical signals that serve multiple purposes. Some of these airborne messages attract predatory insects that will hunt down the plant-eating pests. Others warn neighboring plants to begin producing their own defensive chemicals. The plant being eaten also starts changing its own chemistry, making its leaves less nutritious or more bitter to discourage further damage. Some plants can even identify different types of attackers and tailor their responses accordingly. A leaf being chewed by a caterpillar will trigger different defenses than one being pierced by an aphid. This communication happens without sound or movement that we can easily perceive. It's a quiet conversation conducted in molecules and chemical signals, a language of survival spoken in compounds that drift on the breeze. The plant world is far from passive. It's actively aware, responsive, and surprisingly strategic in its approach to the challenges of staying alive. Moss can survive being completely dried out for years, In some of the world's harshest environments, where water is scarce and conditions are extreme, moss has developed one of nature's most remarkable survival strategies. When drought comes, moss doesn't try to fight it or hide from it. Instead, it embraces a state called cryptobiosis, essentially pausing its life processes until better times return. As water becomes scarce, moss slowly curls its leaves inward and enters a state that's neither fully alive nor dead. Its metabolism drops to nearly zero. Its cells protect themselves with special compounds that prevent damage from dehydration. In this dormant state, moss can survive for months, years, or even decades without water, enduring temperature extremes and radiation that would kill most other organisms. When water finally returns, even just a light mist or brief shower, the moss awakens with remarkable speed. Within minutes, it begins to uncurl and green up again, resuming photosynthesis and normal growth as if no time had passed at all. This ability to pause and resume life makes moss one of the most resilient organisms on our planet, capable of colonizing environments where almost nothing else can survive. Some flowers bloom only once every several years, then disappear. In the understated drama of the plant world, some species have chosen the path of patience over persistence. Century plants, despite their name, typically bloom once every 10 to 30 years, spending decades slowly building up enough energy and resources for one spectacular flowering event. When the time finally comes, they send up a magnificent flower stalk that can reach 20 feet high, covered in hundreds of blooms that attract pollinators from miles around. After this single, exhausting reproductive effort, the plant dies, having invested everything in ensuring the next generation. It's a strategy that seems almost melancholy to human sensibilities, but it's perfectly adapted to harsh desert environments where resources are precious and opportunities for reproduction may be rare. Other plants follow similar patterns of patience and timing. Some bamboo species flower only once every 60 or even 100 years, with all plants of the same species flowering simultaneously across vast geographic areas before dying back to make room for their offspring. These long cycles connect plants to rhythms far slower than our own, reminding us that nature operates on timescales that dwarf human experience. The largest living organism on Earth is a fungus that spans thousands of acres. Hidden beneath the forests of Oregon grows something that challenges our very concept of what constitutes a single living being. The Armillaria ostoyae fungus, also known as the honey mushroom, spreads its underground network across more than 2,000 acres, making it potentially the largest single organism on our planet. Above ground, it occasionally produces the familiar mushrooms we might recognize. But the real organism lives in the soil as a vast web of fungal threads called mycelium. This enormous fungus has been growing for an estimated 2,400 years, slowly expanding through the forest soil, breaking down dead wood and recycling nutrients back into the ecosystem. It's not aggressive or fast-moving. Instead, it grows with the patient persistence of geological time, adding inch by inch to its vast underground kingdom. What makes this fungus particularly fascinating is that despite its enormous size, it's essentially invisible to casual observation. You could walk through the forest above it and never know you were treading on one of the largest living things on Earth. It's a reminder that some of life's most impressive achievements happen quietly, out of sight, with no fanfare or drama. Plants remember experiences and can learn from them. Recent scientific discoveries have revealed that plants possess a form of memory that allows them to learn from past experiences and modify their behavior accordingly. When a plant is exposed to a stressful condition, like drought or cold, it doesn't just endure the experience and forget it. Instead, it can retain information about that stress and respond more quickly and effectively if similar conditions occur again. This plant memory operates through complex changes in gene expression and cellular chemistry. A plant that has experienced drought may keep certain genes more readily available for activation, allowing it to close its stomata and conserve water more quickly when water becomes scarce again. Some plants can even pass these learned responses to their offspring, giving their seeds and seedlings a head start in dealing with environmental challenges. The mechanism isn't the same as animal memory, but the functional result is remarkably similar. Plants can anticipate problems based on past experience, prepare for seasonal changes, and even learn to ignore harmless stimuli that initially triggered defensive responses. This quiet intelligence operates entirely without a nervous system, through the elegant chemistry of cellular communication and genetic regulation. Venus flytraps count their prey before snapping shut. The Venus flytrap has evolved one of the most sophisticated trigger mechanisms in the plant kingdom, and it involves a form of counting that rivals simple arithmetic. Each trap is lined with tiny trigger hairs, and the plant must receive multiple signals before it will close. A single touch might be caused by a falling raindrop or piece of debris, so the plant waits. Only when 2 or more trigger hairs are touched within about 20 seconds will the trap begin to close. This counting mechanism prevents the plant from wasting energy on false alarms while ensuring it captures actual prey. The initial closing is just the beginning. If the trapped object continues to struggle, providing ongoing stimulation to the trigger hairs, the trap will seal more tightly and begin the slow process of digestion. If the stimulus stops, suggesting the object was indeed just debris, the trap will reopen after a day or two. This behavior requires no brain or nervous system, yet it demonstrates a form of decision-making that's both practical and efficient. The Venus flytrap has learned, through millions of years of evolution, to be patient, selective, and conservative with its energy, snapping shut only when the evidence clearly indicates a meal worth the effort. Some plants move their leaves to follow the light throughout the day. While we often think of plants as stationary beings, many species engage in gentle, almost dance-like movements as they track the sun's path across the sky. Prayer plants slowly fold and unfold their leaves in response to changing light conditions, earning their name from the way their leaves press together like hands in prayer as evening approaches. This movement isn't hurried or dramatic. It's a slow, graceful adjustment that happens so gradually you might not notice it unless you watched carefully over several hours. Wood sorrel and oxalis plants demonstrate an even more delicate form of this light-following behavior. Their small, heart-shaped leaflets open wide in bright light and gently fold downward when shadows fall or night arrives. This movement helps them maximize photosynthesis when light is available, while protecting their delicate surfaces from excess heat or cold when conditions become harsh. Even houseplants participate in this quiet choreography. If you've ever noticed your pothos or philodendron gradually leaning toward a window, you're witnessing the same fundamental response that drives sunflowers to track the sun. The plants aren't struggling or straining. They're simply following an ancient instinct to find and face the light, one gentle movement at a time. Certain trees drop their leaves in perfect timing without any external signal. The changing of seasons brings one of nature's most reliable spectacles, as deciduous trees release their leaves in a carefully orchestrated sequence. But what's remarkable is that this timing doesn't depend entirely on external cues like temperature or daylight hours. Trees maintain their own internal calendars, molecular clocks that help them prepare for seasonal changes weeks or even months in advance. As autumn approaches, trees begin to withdraw nutrients from their leaves, slowly breaking down the green chlorophyll that has powered them through the growing season. This reveals the hidden colors that were there all along, the golden yellows and brilliant reds that paint our autumn landscapes. The tree doesn't wait until the last moment to begin this process. It starts preparing for winter while the days are still warm and long. The formation of the abscission layer, the special tissue that will eventually allow leaves to fall cleanly from their branches, begins long before the first leaf actually drops. When the time is right, this layer weakens just enough to let the leaf separate from the tree with minimal damage to either. It's a process so well-timed and coordinated that entire forests can change color and shed their leaves in synchronized waves across the landscape. Some plants can reproduce themselves without ever flowering or producing seeds. In quiet corners of gardens and wild spaces, certain plants have mastered the art of asexual reproduction, creating exact copies of themselves through methods that bypass the usual cycle of flowers, pollination, and seeds. Strawberry plants send out long runners called stolons, which root at intervals to create new plants that are genetically identical to the parent. Spider plants dangle their offspring on graceful arcs, baby plants that can take root wherever they touch suitable soil. Begonias can grow entire new plants from single leaves placed gently on moist soil. The leaf doesn't need to be planted or buried. It simply needs to make contact with the earth, and soon tiny plantlets will emerge along its edges or from its base. This process happens without any drama or visible effort. The leaf quietly marshals its resources and begins the patient work of creating new life. Even more remarkably, some plants, like the walking fern, reproduce by growing new plants at the tips of their fronds. As the frond arches over and touches the ground, it roots there and begins developing into an independent plant, while still connected to its parent. This creates chains of connected plants that can spread across suitable habitat like green stepping stones, each one an exact genetic copy of the original. Trees can warn their neighbors about insect attacks through the air. When a tree comes under attack from hungry insects, it doesn't suffer in silence or isolation. Within hours of the first damage, the tree begins releasing volatile organic compounds into the air, chemical messages that travel on the breeze to nearby trees of the same species. These airborne warnings give neighboring trees time to ramp up their own defenses before the insects arrive. The receiving trees don't ignore these chemical messages. They respond by increasing production of tannins, bitter compounds that make their leaves less palatable to insects. Some trees also begin producing compounds that attract predatory insects, essentially calling for help from the natural enemies of their attackers. This communication system operates entirely through scent, though the concentrations are far too subtle for human noses to detect. What makes this even more remarkable is the specificity of the communication. Trees can distinguish between different types of threats and send correspondingly specific warnings. The chemical signature of a caterpillar attack is different from that of an aphid infestation, and neighboring trees can interpret these differences and prepare appropriate defenses. It's a sophisticated early warning system that operates through the simple act of breathing, trees exhaling their concerns and neighbors inhaling their preparations. Certain cacti bloom only at night, and their flowers last just one evening. In the desert's rhythm of survival, some of the most spectacular flowering displays happen under cover of darkness. Night-blooming cereus, often called Queen of the Night, produces magnificent white flowers that open only after sunset and close forever by dawn. These blooms are enormous, sometimes 8 inches across, and intensely fragrant, designed to attract the nocturnal pollinators that navigate the desert darkness. The timing of this brief flowering is exquisite. The cactus may spend an entire year preparing for this single night, slowly developing its flower buds while conserving water and energy in the harsh desert environment. When conditions are perfect, the flower opens with surprising speed, unfurling its petals over the course of just a few hours as darkness falls. By morning, the flower has already begun to wilt and close, its brief moment of glory complete. This ephemeral beauty might seem wasteful to human sensibilities, but it's perfectly adapted to desert life. By blooming at night, the cactus avoids the brutal daytime heat and attracts specialized pollinators like sphinx moths and bats that are active in the cooler nighttime hours. The brief flowering conserves the plant's precious water and energy while still accomplishing the essential task of reproduction. Some plants can survive in pure sand with almost no nutrients. In coastal dunes and desert environments where most plants would struggle to find adequate nutrition, specialized species have learned to thrive in what appears to be lifeless sand. Beach grass and sea oats don't just tolerate these harsh conditions. They actually help create and stabilize the very dunes they call home. Their extensive root systems spread both deep and wide, creating networks that can extend 3 times the height of the visible plant. These remarkable plants have adapted to survive on the minimal nutrients available in pure sand, often supplemented only by what the wind brings or what they can extract from occasional rainfall. They've developed efficient ways to capture and store water, waxy leaves that minimize moisture loss, and root systems that can quickly extend toward any available water source. Perhaps most impressively, these plants actually improve their environment as they grow. Their roots help bind the sand together, creating more stable growing conditions for themselves and other plants. When their leaves and stems die back, they add organic matter to the sandy soil, slowly building the foundation for more diverse plant communities. They're pioneer species, the first to colonize harsh environments and the ones that make it possible for other plants to follow. Certain vines can find support structures in complete darkness, in the deep shade of forest floors or the darkness beneath other vegetation. Some vines have developed remarkable abilities to locate and climb toward support structures they cannot see. These plants can sense the presence of potential support through subtle environmental cues that remain largely mysterious to scientists. Some vines appear to detect the slight changes in air humidity or temperature that occur near solid objects like tree trunks or rocks. Others may sense the subtle vibrations or sounds that different surfaces produce in response to air movement. Whatever the mechanism, these vines can grow consistently toward supports even in complete darkness, suggesting a form of environmental awareness that operates entirely without light. Once they make contact with a suitable support, many vines can distinguish between living and dead wood, preferring to climb living trees that will continue growing upward and providing ongoing support. Some species even seem to avoid climbing plants that are already heavily burdened with other vines, suggesting a form of social awareness that helps prevent any single support from becoming overloaded. This ability to navigate and make decisions in darkness represents a sophisticated form of plant intelligence that operates through senses we're only beginning to understand. Plants can taste the soil around them and choose their favorite nutrients. Just as you might savor a perfectly ripe piece of fruit, plants have their own sophisticated sense of taste that operates through their root systems. This botanical palate allows them to sample the chemical composition of soil and selectively absorb the nutrients they need most. When a plant's roots encounter a patch of soil rich in nitrogen, they can literally taste this abundance and respond by growing more extensively in that direction. Different plants have different preferences, much like people gravitating toward their favorite foods. Some plants have a particular appetite for phosphorus and will extend their roots preferentially toward areas where this nutrient is abundant. Others seem to crave specific trace minerals, sending out delicate root hairs to explore and sample the underground buffet available to them. This selective feeding happens through specialized proteins in root cell membranes that can detect and transport specific nutrients. The plant doesn't just passively absorb whatever happens to be available. It actively chooses, concentrating its energy on acquiring the nutrients that will best support its growth and health. This underground decision-making process is happening constantly, quietly, beneath every garden and forest, as plants taste their way through the soil in search of exactly what they need. Some flowers can change their color to communicate with pollinators. In the subtle language of plant communication, certain flowers use color changes as a sophisticated signaling system to guide their pollinators efficiently. Lantana flowers, for example, start their lives as yellow or white blooms, colors that signal to bees and butterflies that fresh nectar is available. As the flower ages and its nectar reserves diminish, it gradually shifts to pink, orange, or red, essentially posting a no vacancy sign for visiting pollinators. This color-coded system benefits both plant and pollinator. Bees learn to focus their attention on the younger, more rewarding flowers, while the plant ensures that its precious nectar isn't wasted on visits that won't result in effective pollination. The older flowers don't simply disappear, they remain on the plant, creating a beautiful gradient of colors that continues to attract pollinators from a distance while directing them to the most productive blooms up close. Some orchids take this communication even further, changing not just color but also scent and even the texture of their petals to provide clear signals about their pollination status. These changes happen gradually, often over several days, creating a dynamic conversation between plant and pollinator that maximizes the efficiency of each interaction. Certain trees can live underwater for months without drowning, while most plants would quickly perish if their roots were submerged for extended periods. Some tree species have adapted to thrive in environments that flood regularly. Bald cypress trees, with their distinctive buttressed trunks and feathery foliage, can survive with their roots completely underwater for months at a time. They accomplish this remarkable feat through specialized root structures called pneumatophores, often known as knees, that rise above the water surface even when the main trunk is partially submerged. These woody projections act like snorkels, allowing the tree to breathe even when its lower portions are flooded. The internal structure of these trees is also adapted for underwater survival, with specialized tissues that can transport oxygen from the aerial parts down to the submerged roots. This internal air delivery system operates so efficiently that the trees continue to photosynthesize and grow normally even during extended flood periods. Mangrove trees have taken this adaptation even further, thriving in saltwater environments that would kill most other plants. They've developed specialized cells that can filter salt from seawater, essentially creating their own desalination system. These trees don't just tolerate flooding, they depend on it, using the tidal movements to disperse their seeds and nutrients throughout their aquatic ecosystem. Plants can recognize their own relatives and treat them differently. In what might be the plant kingdom's version of family loyalty, many species can distinguish between their own offspring and unrelated plants, treating their genetic relatives with remarkable favorability. When plant roots encounter the roots of their siblings, they often reduce their competitive behavior, growing less aggressively and sometimes even sharing resources more readily than they would with stranger plants. Sea rocket plants demonstrate this family recognition clearly in controlled studies. When grown with siblings, they develop smaller root systems and show less competitive growth, apparently recognizing that aggressive competition would harm their own genetic legacy. When the same plants are grown with unrelated individuals, they become much more competitive, developing larger root systems and growing more aggressively to claim resources. This recognition system operates through chemical signals that plants release through their roots. Each plant has a unique chemical signature, and those from the same parent plant share similar molecular markers. When roots encounter these familiar chemical signatures, they trigger different growth and behavior patterns than when they detect the signatures of unrelated plants. Some scientists believe this kin recognition may have evolved to promote the survival of shared genes, even at the cost of individual plant success. It's a form of botanical altruism that suggests plant behavior is far more sophisticated and socially aware than we once imagined. Moss can act as a natural air purifier in your home. Beyond their simple beauty and soft texture, mosses possess remarkable abilities to clean and improve the air around them. Unlike most plants that primarily absorb carbon dioxide and release oxygen, mosses can also capture and neutralize a wide variety of airborne pollutants. Their unique structure, with countless tiny leaves and no waxy protective coating, allows them to absorb gases and particles directly from the air through their entire surface. Mosses are particularly effective at removing formaldehyde, benzene, and other volatile organic compounds that commonly accumulate in indoor environments from furniture, carpets, and cleaning products. Some species can absorb these pollutants at rates that rival expensive electronic air purifiers, all while adding natural beauty and a sense of calm to living spaces. The air-purifying ability of moss works continuously, requiring no electricity or maintenance beyond occasional misting to keep the moss healthy. As the moss absorbs pollutants, it breaks them down into harmless compounds or incorporates them into its own tissues, essentially eating the contamination from the air. This makes moss an ideal natural air filter for bedrooms, studies, and other spaces where clean air contributes to rest and well-being. Some plants can predict the weather better than meteorologists. Certain plants have evolved such sensitivity to atmospheric conditions that they can detect approaching weather changes hours or even days before they become apparent to human observers. Scarlet pimpernels, sometimes called poor man's weatherglass, close their flowers when humidity rises, often signaling approaching rain long before clouds appear in the sky. Morning glories demonstrate similar predictive abilities, with their flowers remaining closed on days when storms are approaching, even if the morning appears bright and clear. These plants are responding to subtle changes in barometric pressure, humidity, and electromagnetic fields that precede weather systems by considerable time margins. Pine cones exhibit their own form of weather prediction, opening their scales when dry conditions are approaching and closing them tightly when humidity rises. This behavior protects the seeds inside from moisture that might cause them to germinate at inappropriate times, while ensuring they're released when dry conditions will help them disperse effectively. This meteorological sensitivity isn't magical or mystical. It's the result of millions of years of evolution favoring plants that could anticipate and prepare for changing conditions. These botanical weather predictors are essentially living barometers, their tissues and structures responding to the same physical forces that drive weather systems. Certain flowers bloom in mathematical spirals that follow ancient patterns. In the graceful curves of a sunflower's center, or the elegant spiral of a pine cone, nature follows mathematical principles that have fascinated humans for thousands of years. These patterns, based on the Fibonacci sequence, appear throughout the plant kingdom with remarkable consistency and beauty. Each number in this sequence is the sum of the two preceding numbers: 1, 1, 2, 3, 5, 8, 13, and so on. When you count the spirals in a sunflower head, You'll almost always find numbers from this sequence. A typical sunflower might have 34 spirals going in one direction and 55 in the other, both Fibonacci numbers. This isn't coincidence or human imagination imposing patterns on nature. It's the result of mathematical optimization that allows the plant to pack the maximum number of seeds into the available space. Pine cones, daisies, artichokes, and countless other plants follow these same mathematical principles, creating natural art that combines function with beauty. The spiral patterns emerge naturally from the way plant tissues grow and develop, with each new element appearing at a specific angle that creates the most efficient packing arrangement. This mathematical perfection happens without conscious planning or calculation. Plants simply grow according to their genetic instructions, and those instructions have been shaped by millions of years of evolution to produce the most efficient and beautiful arrangements possible. Some trees can change the chemical composition of their wood in response to stress. When trees face challenging conditions like drought, disease, or physical damage, they don't simply endure these stresses passively. Instead, they actively modify the chemistry of their wood to become more resilient and better adapted to their circumstances. Trees under drought stress often produce wood with smaller cells and thicker walls, creating timber that's denser and more resistant to water loss. When insects attack a tree, it can respond by producing wood with higher concentrations of defensive compounds like tannins or resins. These chemical changes can make the wood less palatable to boring insects and more resistant to fungal infections that often follow pest damage. The tree essentially customizes its own structure to meet the specific challenges it faces. Trees growing in windy locations develop reaction wood with altered cell structure and chemistry that makes their trunks and branches more flexible and resistant to breaking. This specialized wood forms on the side of the tree that faces the prevailing wind, creating a natural reinforcement system that develops exactly where it's needed most. These chemical modifications happen gradually, over seasons or years, as the tree continuously monitors its environment and adjusts its internal processes accordingly. The result is timber that tells the story of the tree's life, with each ring and section reflecting the conditions and challenges the tree faced as it grew. Plants can form partnerships with insects that last for generations. Some of the most enduring relationships in nature exist between plants and their insect partners. Partnerships so close and mutually beneficial that neither species can survive without the other. Fig trees and their pollinating wasps have co-evolved for millions of years into one of nature's most intimate partnerships. Each species of fig tree is pollinated by its own specific species of wasp, and these wasps can reproduce only inside the fig flowers. The female wasp crawls into the developing fig through a tiny opening, losing her wings in the process and becoming trapped inside. She lays her eggs in some of the fig's flowers and pollinates others with pollen she carried from her birth fig. Her larvae develop inside the fig, and the new generation of wasps emerges just as the fig ripens, with females carrying pollen to start the cycle again in other fig trees. Yucca plants and yucca moths share a similarly exclusive relationship. The moth collects pollen from yucca flowers and deliberately deposits it on the stigma of another flower, ensuring the plant's pollination. In return, she lays her eggs in the flower's ovary, and her larvae feed on some of the developing seeds. Both species have evolved specialized structures that make this partnership possible, and neither can reproduce without the other. These relationships represent millions of years of coevolution, with each partner adapting to better serve the other while ensuring its own survival. They demonstrate that cooperation and mutual benefit can be just as powerful evolutionary forces as competition and conflict. Certain plants can survive being frozen solid and return to life when they thaw. In the harshest winter conditions, where temperatures plummet far below freezing, some remarkable plants have developed the ability to endure being completely frozen without suffering permanent damage. Arctic willows and other tundra plants can have their tissues turn solid with ice, their cellular water crystallizing into frozen structures that would destroy most living things. Yet when spring warmth returns, these plants quietly resume their normal functions, as if nothing extraordinary had happened. The secret lies in specialized compounds these plants produce as winter approaches. Natural antifreezes that prevent ice crystals from forming inside their cells in ways that would rupture delicate membranes. Some plants also dehydrate their cells partially before freezing, reducing the amount of water available to form damaging ice crystals. Others produce proteins that can bind to small ice crystals and prevent them from growing large enough to cause cellular destruction. This frozen survival happens in a state of suspended animation, where all metabolic processes essentially stop. The plant doesn't grow, doesn't photosynthesize, doesn't even breathe in any meaningful way. It simply waits, locked in ice, until conditions improve. When warmth finally arrives, the thaw begins from the outside in, and cellular activity gradually resumes in a carefully orchestrated sequence that prevents damage from the transition back to liquid life. Some flowers can heat themselves to attract pollinators on cold days. While most plants depend entirely on external heat sources like sunlight to warm their tissues, certain flowers have evolved the remarkable ability to generate their own heat through internal chemical processes. Skunk cabbage flowers can warm themselves to temperatures 20 degrees higher than the surrounding air, even when snow still covers the ground. This internal heating system, called thermogenesis, works through specialized cellular processes that burn stored energy to produce heat rather than storing it for later use. The warming happens in specialized flower structures that contain densely packed cells capable of rapid metabolism. These cells essentially burn through their energy reserves at accelerated rates, converting stored starches and sugars directly into heat. The process is similar to how warm-blooded animals generate body heat, but it happens in plants that otherwise operate at ambient temperature. This floral heating serves multiple purposes beyond just staying warm. The elevated temperature helps volatilize the flower's scent compounds, making them more noticeable to pollinators even in cold conditions, when most other flowers remain dormant. For insects that are active in early spring or late fall, these warm flowers provide welcome refuges from the cold, places where they can rest and warm up while feeding on nectar and inadvertently providing pollination services. Certain vines can climb by sensing the electrical fields of their support structures. In the complex world of plant navigation, some climbing vines have developed the ability to detect and follow electrical signals that guide them toward suitable support structures. These plants can sense the subtle electrical fields that surround living trees and other plants, using these signals like invisible pathways that lead them toward stable supports they cannot yet touch or see. The detection system operates through specialized cells in the growing tips of the vine that can perceive electrical gradients in their environment. Living trees generate weak electrical currents as part of their normal metabolic processes, and these currents create detectable fields that extend beyond the tree's physical boundaries. Vines sensitive to these electrical signatures can grow consistently toward trees, even when other environmental cues like light or chemical signals are absent or conflicting. This electrical sensing allows vines to distinguish between living supports that will continue growing and providing stable attachment points, and dead wood that might not offer reliable long-term support. The vines don't just climb randomly toward any vertical surface. They actively seek out living partners, creating climbing relationships that can benefit both plants through shared resources and mutual support. The discovery of electrical sensing in plants adds another layer to our understanding of how these seemingly simple organisms navigate and make decisions in their environment, using senses that we're only beginning to appreciate and understand. Some plants can alter their growth patterns to avoid competing with neighbors. Rather than engaging in aggressive competition for space and resources, many plants have evolved sophisticated strategies for avoiding conflict with their neighbors entirely. When plants detect the presence of nearby competitors through root chemistry, leaf shadows, or other environmental cues, they can modify their growth patterns to minimize direct competition and maximize their chances of survival. Bean plants, when grown near competitors, will alter the direction of their growth to lean away from crowded areas and toward open spaces where resources might be more abundant. They don't grow smaller or weaker in response to competition. Instead, they grow smarter, redirecting their energy toward areas where they're more likely to succeed. Some plants even modify their root architecture based on what they detect in the soil around them. When roots encounter the chemical signatures of competing plants, they may grow more deeply or spread more horizontally, exploring soil layers or areas where competition is less intense. This flexible approach to growth allows plants to coexist in crowded environments without the constant stress of direct resource competition. This avoidance behavior represents a form of plant intelligence that prioritizes long-term survival over short-term competitive advantage. Rather than fighting for the same resources, these plants find ways to divide up the available space and resources, creating more stable and sustainable plant communities. Trees can adjust their internal clocks to match seasonal changes years in advance. Deep within the cellular machinery of trees lies a sophisticated timing system that can anticipate seasonal changes with remarkable accuracy, sometimes preparing for conditions that won't arrive for years. Trees don't just respond to immediate environmental cues like temperature and daylight. They maintain internal calendars that track multi-year cycles and help them prepare for long-term changes in their environment. Some tree species begin preparing for particularly harsh winters or extended growing seasons based on patterns they detect over multiple years of observation. They may start producing different proteins, altering their root growth patterns, or modifying their leaf chemistry in response to cycles that play out over decades rather than single seasons. Fruit trees demonstrate this long-term timing most clearly in their masting behavior, where entire populations of trees across vast geographic areas will produce bumper crops of nuts or fruit in synchronized years, then produce very little for several years afterward. This coordination happens without any direct communication between distant trees, suggesting they're all following the same internal timing signals that track multi-year environmental patterns. The trees essentially maintain biological calendars that operate on time scales far longer than annual seasons, allowing them to make strategic decisions about energy allocation and reproduction timing that maximize their success over decades or centuries rather than single growing seasons. Certain flowers can remember and learn from the behavior of their regular pollinators. In relationships that can span entire growing seasons, some flowers develop a form of memory that allows them to adapt their behavior based on the habits and preferences of their most frequent visitors. Flowers that are regularly visited by the same individual bees or butterflies begin to modify their nectar production schedules, scent release patterns, and even their opening times to match the foraging patterns of their most reliable pollinators. This floral learning happens through complex chemical and cellular processes that track pollinator visits and adjust flower behavior accordingly. A flower that notices its primary pollinator typically arrives in late morning, might begin opening later in the day, and concentrating its nectar production to coincide with these visits. The flower doesn't waste energy producing rewards when pollinators aren't likely to be present. Some flowers can even distinguish between effective and ineffective pollinators, providing better rewards to visitors that actually transfer pollen successfully, while offering less attractive incentives to insects that feed without providing pollination services. This selective reward system helps ensure that the flower's energy investment in attracting pollinators produces the maximum reproductive benefit. The memory isn't permanent or rigid. Flowers can adjust their learned behaviors if pollinator patterns change, remaining flexible enough to adapt to new circumstances while still benefiting from the predictable relationships they develop with regular visitors. Some plants can produce natural latex that serves as liquid bandages. When certain plants are injured by cuts, scrapes, or insect damage, they respond by producing natural latex compounds that serve the same protective functions as artificial bandages. This botanical first aid system works by quickly sealing wounds to prevent water loss and infection, while providing antimicrobial protection that helps the plant heal safely. Fig trees, milkweeds, and rubber plants are among the species that produce these natural healing compounds. When their tissues are damaged, specialized cells release latex that flows to the injury site and begins to coagulate, forming a protective seal over the wound. The latex contains compounds that can kill bacteria and fungi, essentially sterilizing the wound while it heals. This latex production happens rapidly, often within minutes of injury, and the protective seal can remain in place for days or weeks while new tissue grows beneath it. As the plant heals, the hardened latex gradually weathers away or is absorbed back into the plant's tissues, leaving behind healthy, intact skin. The healing latex often contains additional compounds that can stimulate new cell growth and tissue regeneration, actively promoting the healing process rather than simply protecting the wound. This makes plant latex production remarkably similar to the way animal blood clotting and healing systems work, suggesting that the fundamental processes of wound repair have evolved similar solutions across very different forms of life. Certain seeds can wait underground for decades before deciding to sprout. In nature's ultimate display of patience, some seeds possess the ability to remain dormant in soil for extraordinary lengths of time, waiting for precisely the right combination of conditions before beginning their journey toward becoming plants. These seeds don't simply lie inert in the soil. They actively monitor their environment through chemical sensors that detect moisture levels, temperature, light conditions, and even the presence of other plants. Desert seeds are particularly skilled at this waiting game, able to distinguish between brief rain showers that wouldn't provide enough water for successful growth and substantial rainfall events that signal genuinely favorable growing conditions. Some desert wildflower seeds have been known to wait 20 or 30 years for the perfect combination of timing, moisture, and competition levels before finally germinating. The seeds maintain their viability through sophisticated preservation systems that protect their internal structures from deterioration over these extended dormancy periods. They produce natural antioxidants and protective compounds that prevent their genetic material and cellular machinery from degrading, essentially keeping themselves in perfect condition for decades while they wait. When conditions finally align with their requirements, these patient seeds can germinate and grow with remarkable speed, making up for their long wait by rapidly establishing themselves before conditions change again. Their extended dormancy isn't procrastination or hesitation. It's a carefully evolved strategy that maximizes their chances of successful reproduction by ensuring they only attempt to grow when success is most likely. Some plants can change the pH of soil around their roots to access locked nutrients. In the complex chemistry of soil nutrition, certain plants have developed the ability to actively modify their local soil environment to unlock nutrients that would otherwise remain unavailable to them. These botanical chemists release specific acids or alkaline compounds through their roots that can dissolve mineral deposits, alter soil chemistry, and make essential nutrients accessible for absorption. Blueberry plants are masters of this soil modification, able to acidify the soil around their roots to levels that would be harmful to most other plants. This acidification helps dissolve iron and other micronutrients that blueberries need, but that remain locked in alkaline soils. The plants essentially create their own customized growing environment by changing the fundamental chemistry of their immediate surroundings. Some plants work in the opposite direction, releasing alkaline compounds that raise soil pH and make different sets of nutrients available. Plants growing in naturally acidic soils might alkalize their root zones to access nutrients like phosphorus that become more available in less acidic conditions. This soil modification happens continuously and selectively, with plants fine-tuning their local soil chemistry in response to their changing nutritional needs throughout their growing cycles. The modified soil conditions can persist for months or even years, creating specialized microenvironments that benefit not only the plants that created them, but sometimes other species that can tolerate the altered conditions. Certain flowers can synchronize their blooming with astronomical events. Beyond the familiar rhythms of daily and seasonal cycles, some flowers attune their blooming schedules to astronomical events that occur over much longer time periods. Night-blooming cereus and other species that flower rarely and briefly often time their spectacular displays to coincide with specific moon phases, planetary alignments, or other celestial events that create optimal conditions for their particular pollination strategies. These astronomical connections aren't mystical or magical. They're based on the same gravitational and electromagnetic forces that influence ocean tides and animal migration patterns. Plants that have evolved to depend on nocturnal pollinators may synchronize their blooming with lunar cycles that affect the activity patterns of moths, bats, and other night-flying creatures. Some desert flowers coordinate their rare blooming events with seasonal astronomical alignments that coincide with the brief periods when their harsh environments become temporarily more hospitable. The flowers essentially use celestial events as long-term timing cues that help them predict optimal conditions that might occur only once every several years. This astronomical timing requires internal clock mechanisms that can track cycles lasting months or years, far longer than the daily circadian rhythms that govern most plant behaviors. The flowers maintain awareness of cosmic rhythms that extend far beyond their immediate environment, connecting their life cycles to the grand movements of celestial bodies across the sky. Some plants can live entirely on air and water without soil. In one of nature's most minimalist approaches to survival, certain plants have evolved to thrive without any connection to soil whatsoever, drawing all their nutrients from air and water alone. Spanish moss, despite its name, isn't actually moss at all, but an epiphytic plant that grows on trees and other surfaces while obtaining everything it needs from atmospheric sources. These air plants have developed specialized scales on their leaves that can capture moisture directly from humid air, along with the dissolved nutrients that moisture contains. They don't parasitize their host plants or draw resources from them. Instead, they simply use trees and other structures as elevated platforms that give them better access to air circulation and occasional rainfall. The root systems of these aerial plants, when they exist at all, serve primarily for anchoring rather than nutrient absorption. The plants have essentially eliminated their dependence on soil by developing highly efficient systems for extracting everything they need from the atmosphere around them. Their leaves function as both photosynthetic organs and nutrient absorption surfaces. This aerial lifestyle allows these plants to colonize environments where traditional rooted plants couldn't survive, including bare rock faces, telephone wires, and even other plants. They represent an elegant solution to the challenge of plant nutrition that requires no soil preparation, no competition for underground resources, and no vulnerability to soil-borne diseases or pests. Trees can share water through their root systems during droughts. During extended dry periods when water becomes scarce, forest communities demonstrate remarkable solidarity through underground water-sharing networks that can mean the difference between survival and death for individual trees. Trees with access to deeper groundwater or more favorable growing locations actively transport water through their root systems to neighboring trees that are struggling with drought stress. This water sharing happens through the same fungal networks that facilitate nutrient exchange, but it operates on an even more immediate and critical timeline during emergency conditions. Trees can detect when their neighbors are experiencing severe water stress through chemical signals, and they respond by redirecting some of their own precious water reserves to help sustain the broader forest community. The sharing isn't random or unlimited. Trees tend to prioritize their own offspring and close relatives, but they also provide support to longtime neighbors and trees that have shared resources with them in the past. This creates forest communities where mutual aid during crises helps ensure that more trees survive difficult periods than would be possible if each tree faced drought conditions alone. The underground water distribution system can operate over surprisingly large distances, with water absorbed by trees near streams or springs being transported through root networks to trees growing on drier hillsides or ridgetops. This hydraulic cooperation turns entire forest ecosystems into interconnected communities where the survival of each individual tree contributes to the resilience of the whole forest. Some plants can detect and avoid areas where other plants have recently died. In a botanical version of learning from others' misfortunes, certain plants possess the ability to detect and avoid soil or growing conditions where other plants have recently died, apparently recognizing these areas as potentially dangerous or unsuitable for growth. This death detection ability operates through chemical analysis of soil conditions and airborne compounds that indicate recent plant mortality. When plants die, they release specific chemical compounds as their tissues decompose, and these molecular signatures can persist in soil and air for extended periods. Living plants that encounter these death signals often modify their growth patterns to avoid those areas, suggesting they interpret these chemical cues as warnings of unfavorable conditions. This avoidance behavior is particularly pronounced in plants that encounter areas where individuals of their own species have died recently. The chemical signatures left by dead relatives apparently provide more specific and relevant warnings than the death signals from unrelated plant species. The ability to detect and learn from plant mortality helps living plants avoid areas that might harbor diseases, soil toxins, or other environmental hazards that contributed to their predecessors' deaths. Rather than blindly colonizing any available space, these plants exercise a form of caution that's informed by the experiences of other plants that attempted to grow in the same locations. This death avoidance behavior represents another layer of plant intelligence that operates through chemical communication and environmental analysis, helping plants make informed decisions about where to invest their energy and resources for the best chances of survival. Certain plants can communicate through underground electrical networks that span entire forests. Beneath the soil surface exists a fascinating form of plant communication that operates through electrical signals transmitted along root systems and fungal networks. When a tree experiences stress, injury, or discovers a new resource, it can send electrical impulses through these underground pathways at speeds that rival animal nervous systems. These botanical electrical signals travel through specialized conducting tissues in roots and along the fungal threads that connect different plants. The electrical messages carry specific information about the type and intensity of whatever triggered them. A tree being attacked by beetles sends different electrical patterns than one discovering a water source or detecting the approach of a storm system. Neighboring plants that receive these electrical signals can interpret them and respond appropriately, beginning defensive preparations, redirecting growth toward newly discovered resources, or bracing for incoming weather changes. This electrical communication system operates continuously throughout forest ecosystems, creating a kind of plant internet that keeps the entire community informed about changing conditions. The signals can travel remarkably long distances through the network, allowing trees separated by hundreds of yards to share information about local conditions and coordinate their responses to environmental challenges. Scientists are only beginning to understand the complexity and sophistication of these electrical plant communication networks. But early research suggests they may be far more intricate and information-rich than previously imagined. The forest, in this sense, operates as a single interconnected organism capable of collective decision-making and coordinated responses to environmental changes. Some flowers can adjust their nectar sweetness based on the competition around them. In the subtle economics of pollinator attraction, flowers demonstrate remarkable business savvy by adjusting the quality of their rewards based on what competing flowers in their vicinity are offering. When a flower detects that nearby blooms are producing particularly sweet or abundant nectar, it can respond by increasing its own nectar concentration to remain competitive in the pollinator marketplace. This nectar adjustment happens through sophisticated monitoring of airborne chemical signals that reveal information about neighboring flowers' reward offerings. Flowers can literally smell the competition and adjust their own production accordingly. During peak blooming seasons, when many flowers are competing for the attention of limited pollinators, individual flowers may increase their nectar sweetness by significant amounts to ensure they remain attractive to visiting insects. The adjustment process works in both directions. When competition is low and pollinators are abundant relative to available flowers, blooms may reduce their nectar investment, conserve an energy while still providing sufficient reward to attract the visitors they need. This dynamic pricing system allows flowers to optimize their energy expenditure based on real-time market conditions in their local pollinator economy. Some flowers even engage in temporal market analysis, tracking pollinator activity patterns over multiple days or weeks, and adjusting their nectar production schedules to coincide with periods of high pollinator activity while reducing investment during slow periods. This sophisticated resource management helps flowers maximize their reproductive success while minimizing unnecessary energy expenditure. Certain trees can alter their wood density to create natural musical instruments. As trees grow and develop over decades or centuries, some species can modify the internal structure of their wood in ways that create naturally occurring acoustic properties. Trees growing in consistently windy environments often develop wood with specific grain patterns and density variations that cause their trunks and branches to resonate at particular frequencies when air moves through or around them. These natural acoustic modifications happen gradually as the tree responds to the consistent patterns of wind and weather in its environment. The tree doesn't consciously create music, but the physical properties of its wood develop in ways that produce harmonic vibrations when stimulated by moving air. Some hollow trees develop internal chambers and resonating spaces that amplify and modulate these natural sounds. Indigenous cultures around the world have long recognized and utilized these naturally musical trees, incorporating them into spiritual and cultural practices that celebrate the connection between forest ecosystems and human artistic expression. The trees essentially collaborate with wind and weather to create ambient soundscapes that change with seasons, weather patterns, and the tree's continued growth and development. Modern acoustic researchers studying these naturally musical trees have discovered principles of resonance and harmonic structure that inform the design of human-made musical instruments, suggesting that trees may have been creating sophisticated acoustic art for millions of years before humans learned to shape wood into deliberate musical tools. Some plants can survive complete dehydration and return to full health when water becomes available again. In environments where water availability can be extremely unpredictable, certain plants have mastered the art of resurrection through a process called anhydrobiosis, literally meaning life without water. These resurrection plants can lose up to 95% of their cellular water content, appearing completely dead and dried, yet return to full vitality within hours of receiving moisture. The survival mechanism involves sophisticated cellular preparations that begin as water becomes scarce. The plant produces special protective proteins and sugars that replace water in cellular structures, maintaining the integrity of cell membranes and genetic material, even in a completely desiccated state. These protective compounds essentially create a kind of biological glass that preserves cellular architecture while eliminating the water that would normally be essential for life. During the dried state, all metabolic processes cease entirely. The plant doesn't breathe, doesn't grow, doesn't age in any meaningful way. It exists in a state of suspended animation that can last for months or even years until moisture returns to its environment. When water finally becomes available, the protective compounds dissolve and normal cellular function resumes with remarkable speed. This resurrection ability allows these plants to colonize some of the world's most arid environments, thriving in places where water might be available only a few days each year. They represent one of the most extreme adaptations to water scarcity found anywhere in the plant kingdom, demonstrating that life can persist even when all the conditions we normally consider essential are temporarily absent. Certain vines can recognize and remember the shapes of their support structures. Some climbing plants possess a form of spatial memory that allows them to remember and respond to the three-dimensional geometry of their support structures in sophisticated ways. When a vine encounters a particular shaped support like a fence post, tree trunk, or artificial structure, it can adjust its climbing strategy to match the specific geometry of that support system. This shape recognition operates through sensitive touch receptors in the vine's growing tips that can distinguish between different surface textures, curves, angles, and structural features. The vine essentially creates a mental map of its support structure and modifies its growth patterns to climb most efficiently based on what it has learned about that particular support's characteristics. Vines that have successfully climbed similar support structures in the past can apply that learned experience when they encounter comparable shapes and surfaces. They demonstrate improved climbing efficiency and speed when dealing with familiar support geometries, suggesting they retain and utilize spatial memories from previous climbing experiences. Some vines can even anticipate structural features they haven't yet reached, based on the patterns they've detected in the portions of the support they've already explored. They may begin preparing specialized attachment structures or modify their growth direction in advance of reaching predicted features like branches, joints, or changes in surface texture. This spatial intelligence allows vines to climb complex structures much more efficiently than would be possible through random trial and error, demonstrating a form of three-dimensional problem-solving that rivals the spatial reasoning abilities of many animals. Some plants can produce natural sunscreen compounds to protect themselves from harmful radiation. When exposed to intense ultraviolet light that could damage their delicate photosynthetic machinery, many plants respond by producing their own protective compounds that function essentially like botanical sunscreen. These natural UV-blocking substances are deposited in leaf surfaces and other exposed plant tissues, creating a protective barrier that filters harmful radiation while still allowing beneficial light wavelengths to pass through. The sunscreen production is dynamic and responsive, with plants increasing their protective compound production when UV levels are high and reducing it when conditions are less intense. This allows them to balance protection against radiation damage with the need to maintain efficient photosynthesis and normal cellular function. Different plants produce different types of natural sunscreens, with some specializing in blocking particular wavelengths of harmful radiation, while others create broad-spectrum protection, similar to human sunscreen products. Plants growing at high altitudes or in regions with intense sunlight often have particularly sophisticated UV protection systems that allow them to thrive in conditions that would quickly damage less well-protected species. Some of these plant-produced sunscreen compounds are so effective that researchers study them as potential ingredients for human sun protection products. The plants have essentially solved the same radiation protection challenges that humans face, often with greater elegance and efficiency than our throughout the day, to optimize light artificial alternatives. Trees can adjust their leaf angles, capture and temperature control. Rather than maintaining static leaf positions, many trees actively adjust the angles and orientations of their leaves throughout the day to maximize photosynthetic efficiency while avoiding overheating or excessive water loss. This leaf movement happens gradually and continuously, with individual leaves tracking optimal positioning based on sun angle, temperature, and moisture conditions. The adjustment mechanism operates through specialized cells at the base of leaf stems that can change their internal pressure to create controlled movement. These motor cells respond to light intensity, temperature, and internal plant signals to position leaves for optimal function under current conditions. During the hottest part of the day, leaves might angle themselves to reduce direct sun exposure, while in cooler morning and evening hours, they may flatten to capture maximum available light. This leaf positioning system allows trees to maintain efficient photosynthesis while avoiding the stress that would result from excessive heat or light exposure. The movements are subtle and gradual, often imperceptible to casual observation, but they can significantly impact the tree's overall energy balance and health. Some trees coordinate their leaf movements across their entire canopy, creating wave-like patterns of adjustment that sweep through the tree as conditions change throughout the day. This coordinated response suggests a level of internal communication and control that allows the tree to optimize its entire light capture system as a unified whole. Certain flowers can change their scent throughout the day to attract different types of pollinators. In a sophisticated form of temporal marketing, some flowers produce different fragrances at different times of day to appeal to the various pollinators that are active during those periods. Morning scents might be designed to attract early rising bees, while evening fragrances target night-flying moths and other nocturnal visitors. This scent scheduling happens through complex biochemical processes that regulate the production and release of different aromatic compounds based on internal timing mechanisms. The flower doesn't just turn scent production on and off. It actually creates entirely different chemical bouquets designed to appeal to the sensory preferences of different pollinator species. Some flowers produce fresh, sweet scents during daylight hours when butterflies and bees are active, then switch to heavy, musky fragrances in the evening when moths and beetles become the primary visitors. The transition between different scent profiles can happen gradually over several hours, or change dramatically within minutes as day turns to night. This temporal scent variation maximizes the flower's appeal across different pollinator communities, while avoiding the energy cost of producing all possible attractant compounds simultaneously. The flower essentially operates multiple marketing campaigns targeted at different customer bases, each optimized for the preferences and activity patterns of specific pollinator groups. Some plants can detect the electrical activity of approaching storms and prepare accordingly. Long before human weather forecasting instruments detect approaching storm systems, certain plants begin preparing for severe weather by sensing the electrical changes that precede thunderstorms and other weather disturbances. These plants can detect alterations in atmospheric electrical fields that occur hours or even days before storms arrive in their vicinity. The electrical sensing mechanism operates through specialized structures in leaves and stems that are sensitive to electromagnetic field fluctuations. When these sensors detect the characteristic electrical signatures of approaching weather systems, the plant begins implementing protective responses like closing stomata to conserve water, strengthening cell walls, and producing protective compounds. Plants that can predict storms often show improved survival rates during severe weather events because their advanced preparations help them withstand high winds, heavy rains, and other stressful conditions. They may alter their growth patterns in the days leading up to storms, creating more flexible structures that can bend without breaking or developing stronger root systems that provide better anchoring. This electrical weather sensing represents another example of plant sensory abilities that exceed human perception, allowing plants to detect and respond to environmental changes that our own senses cannot perceive without technological assistance. The plants essentially operate their own early warning systems that help them survive in unpredictable environments. Some seeds can distinguish between different types of soil and choose where to germinate based on quality indicators. Rather than germinating randomly wherever they land, certain seeds possess sophisticated soil testing abilities that allow them to evaluate growing conditions before committing to germination. These seeds can analyze soil chemistry, moisture content, nutrient availability, and other factors that will determine their chances of successful establishment and growth. The soil evaluation process happens through chemical sensors in the seed coat that can detect dissolved minerals, organic compounds, pH levels, and microbial activity in the surrounding soil. Seeds that encounter poor quality soil conditions may remain dormant even when temperature and moisture conditions would normally trigger germination, waiting for better conditions or more favorable locations. Some seeds can even detect the presence of competing plants in the soil around them and factor this information into their germination decisions. Seeds that sense heavy competition may delay germination until conditions change, while those that detect favorable growing conditions with minimal competition may germinate more quickly to take advantage of the opportunity. This pre-germination soil analysis allows seeds to make informed decisions about when and where to begin their growth, significantly improving their chances of survival and successful reproduction. Rather than gambling on random conditions, these seeds exercise a form of quality control that ensures they only attempt to grow when conditions are favorable for their success. Certain plants can modify their root architecture in real time based on soil conditions they encounter. As plant roots grow and explore soil environments, they continuously adjust their branching patterns, growth directions, and structural characteristics based on what they discover in different soil regions. When roots encounter areas rich in nutrients, they may develop more extensive branching patterns to maximize resource capture in those productive zones. This adaptive root architecture happens through sophisticated communication between different parts of the root system, allowing the plant to coordinate its underground growth strategy based on information gathered throughout its root zone. Roots that discover water sources may signal other parts of the system to grow in that direction, while roots encountering obstacles or poor conditions may redirect growth toward more promising areas. The root system essentially operates as an underground intelligence network that constantly maps soil conditions and adjusts growth strategies accordingly. Individual roots can change their growth rate, branching frequency, and chemical production based on local conditions while coordinating with the overall root system to optimize the plant's underground resource capture strategy. Some plants can even modify their root chemistry in different soil zones, producing different enzymes or chemical compounds in areas where specific nutrients need to be accessed, while maintaining different chemical profiles in regions where other resources are the priority. This chemical specialization allows the same root system to efficiently exploit diverse soil conditions simultaneously. Trees can coordinate their autumn color changes across entire forests through chemical communication. The spectacular autumn color displays that paint entire forests in coordinated waves of gold, red, and orange result from sophisticated chemical communication networks that allow trees to synchronize their seasonal changes across vast areas. When one tree begins its autumn preparations, it releases chemical signals that inform neighboring trees about seasonal timing and environmental conditions. This forest-wide coordination ensures that trees in the same area undergo their autumn transitions at optimal times for their shared environment, rather than following purely individual schedules that might leave some trees vulnerable to early cold snaps or late-season storms. The chemical communication allows trees to share information about local weather patterns, soil conditions, and other factors that influence the timing of seasonal changes. The coordination can extend across hundreds of acres of forest, with trees miles apart participating in synchronized color changes that create the dramatic autumn displays we observe from aerial perspectives. The synchronization isn't perfect or rigid, but it's sufficient to create the coordinated waves of color that sweep across landscapes during peak autumn seasons. This seasonal communication represents one of the most visible examples of the chemical networks that connect forest communities, demonstrating how individual trees participate in larger ecological systems that operate on scales far beyond what any single tree could coordinate alone. Some flowers can remember the time of day when their most effective pollinators typically visit. Through careful observation and learning over multiple days or weeks, certain flowers develop detailed schedules of when their most productive pollinators are likely to arrive, adjusting their nectar production, scent release, and flower opening times to coincide with these optimal visiting periods. This pollinator scheduling allows flowers to maximize their reproductive success while conserving energy by avoiding wasteful resource expenditure during periods when effective pollinators are unlikely to be present. The learning process involves tracking the timing, frequency, and effectiveness of different pollinator visits, with flowers gradually adjusting their daily schedules based on accumulated experience with their local pollinator community. Flowers that learn their pollinators' schedules can increase their reproductive success significantly compared to flowers that maintain constant resource production regardless of pollinator activity patterns. Some flowers can distinguish between different individual pollinators within the same species, recognizing particularly effective or frequent visitors and timing their peak attractiveness to coincide with those specific individuals' typical arrival times. This individual recognition suggests a level of learning and memory that approaches the sophistication found in animal behavior. The temporal learning abilities of these flowers represent a form of botanical intelligence that operates through chemical memory systems and cellular timing mechanisms, allowing plants to optimize their reproductive strategies based on learned experience with their local environmental conditions and biological communities. Certain plants can send distress signals that travel for miles through underground fungal networks. When a plant faces a serious threat like disease, severe drought, or insect infestation, it doesn't suffer in isolation. Through the vast underground web of fungal connections that link forest communities, distressed plants can broadcast chemical alarm signals that travel remarkable distances through soil networks. These distress calls can reach plants miles away, providing advance warning about threats that might eventually spread to distant parts of the forest community. The chemical distress signals are specific and informative, carrying details about the type of threat, its severity, and the plant's current condition. Receiving plants can interpret these molecular messages and begin preparing appropriate defenses long before the threat reaches their location. A tree being attacked by a particular type of beetle can warn distant trees to begin producing the specific chemical compounds that deter those insects. This long-distance communication system operates continuously throughout forest ecosystems, creating an early warning network that helps entire plant communities respond to threats more effectively than any individual plant could manage alone. The signals travel through fungal networks at speeds that can cover several miles per day, fast enough to provide meaningful advance notice of approaching problems. The underground distress communication represents one of the most sophisticated information-sharing systems found in nature, allowing plant communities to function as interconnected organisms capable of collective defense and mutual protection across vast geographic areas. Some plants can adjust their growth timing to avoid peak insect activity seasons. Rather than growing continuously whenever conditions permit, certain plants have learned to time their most vulnerable growth phases to coincide with periods when their primary insect pests are least active or abundant. These plants essentially schedule their development around the life cycles of the creatures that would most like to eat them. Young leaves and tender shoots are particularly attractive to many insects, so plants may delay producing these vulnerable tissues until after peak insect breeding seasons have passed. Some plants compress their entire annual growth into brief windows when insect populations are naturally low, growing rapidly during these safe periods and then entering protective dormant phases when pest pressure increases. This strategic timing requires sophisticated internal monitoring of both seasonal patterns and insect activity cycles, with plants maintaining biological calendars that track the optimal windows for safe growth in their specific environments. The timing strategies can vary significantly between different locations and plant species, reflecting local adaptations to particular insect communities and seasonal patterns. Plants that successfully time their growth to avoid peak pest activity show significantly better survival rates and healthier development compared to those that grow without regard for insect population cycles. This temporal pest avoidance represents a form of ecological intelligence that prioritizes long-term plant health over immediate growth opportunities. Certain flowers can produce different nectar flavors to appeal to specific pollinator preferences. Beyond simply adjusting sweetness levels, some flowers create distinctly different nectar flavors designed to appeal to the taste preferences of their various pollinator species. Just as different people prefer different flavors of food, different pollinators have distinct preferences for particular nectar chemical profiles and taste combinations. Flowers that depend on multiple pollinator species may produce complex nectar blends that appeal to several different taste preferences simultaneously. While flowers that specialize in attracting specific pollinators often develop highly customized flavor profiles that perfectly match their target species preferences. Some flowers can even modify their nectar flavor throughout the day as different pollinators become active. The flavor production involves sophisticated biochemical processes that create specific combinations of sugars, amino acids, and other compounds that result in distinct taste experiences for visiting pollinators. Bees might prefer certain amino acid combinations that provide essential nutrients for their development, while butterflies may be attracted to different sugar profiles that match their metabolic needs. This culinary customization helps flowers compete more effectively for pollinator attention in crowded flowering environments, with each species developing signature nectar flavors that help distinguish them from competing blooms and build loyal relationships with their most effective pollinators. Some trees can detect underground water sources and grow roots specifically toward them. When trees sense the presence of distant water sources through subtle environmental cues, they can direct root growth specifically toward these hidden resources with remarkable accuracy. This water-seeking behavior operates through detection systems that can sense moisture gradients, subtle vibrations, or chemical signals that indicate the presence of underground streams, springs, or water-bearing rock formations. The directed root growth happens gradually over months or years, with trees investing significant energy in extending roots toward detected water sources, even when those sources are located considerable distances from the main trunk. Some trees can grow roots over 100 feet to reach underground water that they detected through their sensing systems. This targeted water seeking allows trees to survive in arid environments where surface water is scarce or unreliable, providing them with access to deep groundwater sources that sustain them through extended drought periods. The trees essentially prospect for water like underground miners, using biological detection methods to locate and access hidden water resources. The water detection and directed root growth represent sophisticated forms of plant behavior that require coordination between sensing systems and growth control mechanisms, allowing trees to actively seek out and secure the water resources they need for survival, rather than simply hoping water will become available in their immediate vicinity. Certain plants can recognize day-length changes with precision that rivals atomic clocks. The ability of plants to detect and respond to subtle changes in daylight duration operates through internal timing mechanisms of extraordinary precision and sensitivity. Some plants can detect daylight changes as small as minutes per day, responding to the gradual seasonal shifts in day length with accuracy that matches or exceeds the precision of sophisticated human timekeeping devices. This photoperiod detection allows plants to anticipate seasonal changes weeks or months in advance, beginning their preparations for autumn, winter, or spring transitions long before obvious environmental cues become apparent. Plants use this precise timing information to coordinate flowering, seed production, dormancy preparations, and other critical life cycle events with optimal seasonal conditions. The detection system operates through specialized light-sensing proteins that can measure not just the duration of light exposure, but also subtle changes in light quality and intensity that occur as day length shifts throughout the year. These molecular light meters provide plants with incredibly detailed information about their position in the annual cycle. Plants that depend on precise seasonal timing for successful reproduction often rely on this daylight measurement system to ensure their flowers open, seeds mature, or other critical events occur at exactly the right moments for maximum success in their particular environments and ecological communities. Some plants can alter their leaf chemistry to become more nutritious when growing in poor soil. When plants find themselves in nutrient-poor environments, some species respond by modifying their leaf chemistry to become more efficient at extracting and utilizing the limited nutrients available to them. These plants essentially upgrade their own nutritional processing systems to make the most of challenging growing conditions. The chemical modifications involve producing specialized enzymes and metabolic pathways that can break down and utilize nutrients that would normally be inaccessible or unusable. Plants may alter their cellular chemistry to more efficiently process trace minerals, extract nutrients from organic matter, or recycle internal nutrients more completely. Some plants growing in poor soils develop leaves with enhanced nutrient storage capabilities, allowing them to capture and retain nutrients during brief periods when they become available, and then gradually utilize these stored resources during times of scarcity. The leaves essentially function as nutritional savings accounts that help the plant survive extended periods of nutrient limitation. This adaptive leaf chemistry allows plants to thrive in environments where other species would struggle to survive, demonstrating remarkable biochemical flexibility that enables plants to customize their internal processes to match the specific challenges of their growing environments. Certain vines can detect the health status of their support trees and adjust their climbing behavior accordingly. Some climbing plants possess the ability to assess the health and vitality of their host trees through chemical and physical cues, adjusting their climbing strategies based on their evaluation of their support's condition and prospects. Vines may climb more gently on stressed or weakened trees to avoid damaging struggling supports, while growing more aggressively on healthy, vigorous trees that can easily handle their weight. And so we drift toward the end of our gentle journey through the botanical world, having wandered among the patient wisdom of plants that surround us every day. From the underground networks that connect entire forests in silent conversation, to the flowers that remember their visitors and adjust their gifts accordingly, we've glimpsed a world of quiet intelligence that operates just beyond our usual awareness. These green beings don't hurry or worry. They simply exist with remarkable grace, solving problems we're only beginning to understand, communicating in languages of chemistry and light, and demonstrating that intelligence comes in forms far different from our own. In their patient rhythms, their generous sharing, and their elegant adaptations, plants offer us a different way of being in the world. Tonight, as you settle into sleep, remember that you're surrounded by this gentle botanical wisdom. The air you breathe has been gifted by countless leaves. The ground beneath supports networks of cooperation that span miles. And somewhere nearby, plants are quietly going about the ancient work of turning sunlight into life, sharing resources with their neighbors, and keeping time with rhythms far older than our own. If these peaceful plant stories brought you a moment of calm, consider subscribing for more gentle explorations of the natural world. There's always more wonder waiting to be discovered, one quiet revelation at a time. Sleep well, and may your dreams be as patient and generous as the green world that surrounds us all.